On January 25, 1944, the Sea of Japan lay cold, steel blue, and deceptively calm. Hidden beneath its surface, far below the reach of winter winds and drifting snow flurries, the U.S. submarine USS Batfish, SS-310, moved silently at 3 knots. Her hull creaked softly against the pressure, a groaning whisper that echoed through the narrow passageways inside. Every man aboard could feel it. Not fear, not tension, but the quiet weight of expectation that came after weeks of fruitless patrol. The Pacific War had entered a new phase. Japanese naval dominance had been shattered in the Central Pacific, yet the Empire still possessed enough destroyers, escorts, transports, and fast cutters to make every American submarine patrol a duel against an enemy that refused to die quietly. Submarines like Batfish had become the unseen hand strangling Japan's supply lines, sinking merchant ships, tankers, and troop transports with ruthless precision. But what Batfish was about to do over 4 unbelievable days would shock even the US Navy and leave Japanese commanders in disbelief. Inside the control room, red lamps cast faint halos over the watch crew. The air smelled of machine oil, stale coffee, and stale confinement, the smell of submariner life. Lieutenant Commander John K. Fife, newly placed in command, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, studying sonar reports. He was a quiet man, not given to dramatic speeches or forceful gestures. He preferred numbers, angles, geometry, and patience, the traits of a killer below the waves. For days, the sub had been tracking faint hints of Japanese convoy movement, garbled radio intercepts, sudden clusters of engine noises heard through the hydrophones, a merchant SOS intercepted but not fully triangulated. The Japanese Navy's anti-submarine forces, rattled by increasing losses, had begun moving their ships in smaller, faster formations, but that also made them vulnerable. A single US submarine could lurk unseen, waiting for that one mistake, that one unlucky bearing change, that one moment when sound, speed, and distance aligned for a perfect ambush. Shortly before dawn, sonar reported a faint signal. Distant propellers. Slow, heavy, a merchant or tanker. Then another signal. Faster screws, tighter rhythm. An escort destroyer. The crew stirred. Men sat upright in their bunks. Coffee pots clattered. The hum of the boat sharpened into something electric. Fife leaned over the plotting table. "Range is closing," the sonar operator whispered. "Course? Steady. Northeast by east. About 12 knots. That meant a convoy. A small one, but still a convoy. Fife ordered the boat to come to periscope depth. The ballast tanks hissed. The hull groaned again. The sea pressed harder, then softened as the submarine rose. The periscope broke the surface silently, water sliding down its narrow frame. Fife gripped the handles and pressed his eyes to the viewfinder. The Pacific horizon spread before him in black and white shadows. There it was, a Japanese merchant ship, probably 4,000 to 5,000 tons, chugging forward with a sluggish confidence. And ahead of it, slicing the water in a protective arc, was a destroyer escort, a sleek silhouette bristling with guns. Fife whispered to himself, "Escort first." It was the unwritten rule of submarine warfare. The escort dies, the convoy dies. Leave the escort alive, and you die. The firing solution took minutes, but it felt like an hour. The crew moved with silent efficiency, no shouting, no wasted motion. Tubes 1 and 2. Ready. Fife exhaled once, a long, slow breath. Fire 1. A deep mechanical thump vibrated through the submarine. Fire 2. 2 silver bullets shot into the darkness. The sonar room waited. Every man leaned forward in silence. Then, a violent, hollow "whoomph" echoed through the water. The escort destroyer erupted into flame and black smoke. She lurched sideways, her bow lifting from the water before dropping sharply as a second explosion tore through her boilers. Japanese sailors scrambled for lifeboats, shouting commands swallowed by fire and steam. The merchant ship immediately panicked, turning hard to port. That was its mistake. Fife anticipated the movement, rotated the periscope a few degrees, and ordered tubes 3 and 4. Seconds later, the torpedoes struck the merchant vessel midship. The blast blew open her cargo hold, sending steel plates, crates, and burning debris into the air. The ship listed heavily, water pouring in. The crew of Batfish erupted in quiet celebration, not loud, not chaotic, but in controlled, emotional release. Submariners celebrated softly. Loud noise was a luxury surface crews had. That was day one. No one aboard expected there would be more, but the ocean was not through with them. The following morning, sonar picked up more contacts, multiple screws, faster this time. Japanese commanders had sent reinforcements to investigate yesterday's attack. That meant destroyers, real warships, not escorts. Fife ordered Batfish deeper than usual, 250 feet, 300 feet, then 350, listening carefully. Destroyers were predators. They moved with sharp rhythm, propeller blades cutting faster through the water. Sonar identified 2, then 3. Japanese destroyers in 1944 were not amateurs. They were aggressively trained, disciplined, and feared American submarines more than carriers or battleships. The Japanese Navy's destroyer captains carried reputations as relentless hunters. But they also carried weaknesses, rigid doctrine, predictable patterns, and overconfidence. Fife used that. Batfish rose again to periscope depth just before noon. He caught a glimpse of a destroyer sweeping the area. The ship was turning in a wide arc, assuming the American submarine had fled. That was their second mistake. "Bring her around," Fife said calmly. "Range? 6,000 yards and closing slowly." "Enough. Tubes 1 and 2. Solution ready." He waited. Waited. "Fire." 2 torpedoes slipped into the sea. The destroyer never saw them. The explosion ripped through her stern, flipping her gun crews into the air. A second detonation cracked the hull, splitting the ship like firewood. 2 destroyers in 2 days. Back in Tokyo, no one believed the initial report. Japanese naval intelligence assumed pilot error, miscommunication, or mechanical failure. A single submarine sinking multiple warships in days? Impossible. Not without running out of torpedoes. Or luck. But Fife was not done. On day 3, Batfish intercepted another convoy, a small one, but with an armed escort. This time, the Japanese ships attempted evasive zigzag patterns, but zigzagging against an experienced American submarine commander often ensured the worst possible angle of approach. Fife fired a spread of torpedoes. One missed, the other struck home. The escort exploded in a shower of sparks. 3 destroyers down. Japanese intelligence began circulating internal memos about an unusually aggressive American submarine in the Sea of Japan. By day 4, the Japanese High Command assumed the submarine would retreat to refit, reload, or regroup. Instead, Batfish detected another transport, low-value target. But a ship was a ship. Supplies were supplies. Japan could no longer afford losses. Fife tracked the merchant ship, waited until sunset, surfaced briefly to charge batteries, then dove again. The torpedoes struck in the early hours. The merchant ship was split open before dawn. 7 minutes later, sonar picked up another target, an armed trawler converted for escort duty. It raced forward blindly, unaware it was charging directly into a hunter's mouth. 1 torpedo, 1 hit, 1 sinking. 5 ships in 4 days. 3 were destroyers, the backbone of Japan's anti-submarine fleet. The crew of Batfish stood in stunned silence. They had expected a successful patrol, not a legendary one. Word reached Pearl Harbor weeks later. Navy staff officers read the patrol report twice, thinking it exaggerated. Then they read it a third time. It wasn't. By the end of those 4 days, Batfish had done something Japanese destroyer captains had sworn was impossible. It had turned the hunter-killer warship into prey. And in Tokyo, disbelief gave way to an uncomfortable truth. American submarines had become the most feared wolves in the Pacific, capable of tearing open the Empire's defences in days. This was only the beginning of the legend. The morning of January the 28th, 1944, began inside the USS Batfish with a metallic clatter that woke half the forward torpedo room. The sea had developed a low, rolling swell, heavy enough to make the bow rise and fall like a breathing giant. In the dim red lighting, sleeping crewmen rubbed their eyes and drifted toward duty stations, words spreading in low voices. Sonar had picked up another contact. No one said it out loud, but every man aboard sensed it. They were living through something rare, a patrol where every day brought a new target, and every attack seemed blessed by fate, geometry, and Fife's unnerving patience. But Fife didn't believe in luck, not in the romantic sense. He believed in discipline, preparation, and taking the shot only when mathematics and instinct aligned. And now, 3 destroyers and 2 auxiliaries lay somewhere beneath the Pacific, victims of that precision. Still, 5 kills in 4 days meant one thing: the Japanese would respond. And they did. At 0600 hours, sonar picked up multiple fast-moving screws approaching from the west. The sound signature was unmistakable: long propeller blades, high RPM output, sharp cavitation, a Japanese destroyer squadron. 2 ships, possibly 3. They were searching. The water felt different when destroyers hunted. Every man aboard sensed it. The ship felt smaller, the silence heavier, the air tighter inside the steel hull. The routine sounds of submarine life grew sharper. The click of a wrench, the soft squeak of boots on grating, the humming vibration of the engines. Fife stood over the sonar operator, listening. "Angle? Coming closer. Steady bearing, sir." That meant the destroyers were sweeping forward in an expanding search arc. They weren't guessing. They were narrowing. Fife spoke quietly. "Take her deeper." The diving klaxon stayed silent. This was a silent dive. No noise. No rushed motion. Just gravity sinking them into the dark. 250 feet. 275. 300. 325. The deeper the submarine went, the greater the pressure. The hull creaked like an old ship, straining at its bones. Paint flakes fell from the ceiling. A few bolts leaked thin ribbons of seawater. 350 feet. Sonar suddenly stiffened. "Sir, pinging." There it was, sharp, mechanical, cold. Ping, pause, ping, pause. A Japanese destroyer was using active sonar, sending out sound waves like an underwater searchlight. If the wave bounced off Batfish's hull, the operator topside would see the return echo, and then the depth charges would come. Fife whispered, "Hold steady, no course changes." The submarine drifted like a ghost. The pinging grew louder, louder, then slowly weakened. They had slipped beneath the search cone. But the destroyers weren't fooling around. A second vessel moved in from the flank, sweeping across a different depth layer. Japanese destroyer crews had learned through bitter experience that American submarines often tried diving deeper to escape. So this ship searched the deep zones first. The water vibrated, then ping, 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 ping. Fife exhaled. "They've got us." The first depth charge exploded 30 seconds later. A violent boom echoed through the hull. Dust rained from overhead piping. Lights flickered. Coffee spilled down the mess table. Somewhere aft, a wrench clattered to the deck. Then came the next explosion. Closer. Then 5 more. Depth charges didn't need direct hits. The shockwave alone could rip open pipes, crack batteries, shatter electrical relays. One well-placed charge could sink a submarine by overpressure alone. The men gripped whatever they could. Some dug fingernails into their palms. Others closed their eyes. Fife stood like a statue, holding the periscope stand to steady himself. "Helm," he whispered. "Come to 3 degrees up bubble." Just enough to rise slightly without giving away a wake. The next detonation struck hard enough to rattle the teeth of the officers. Still, the hull held. Destroyers circled above like wolves, sniffing for any hint of sound. One misplaced footstep could give the submarine away. The cook tied down every cup, pan and handle in the galley to keep them from clanking. The pressure outside reached levels that could crush a man in seconds if the hull failed. But Batfish held. After an hour, the destroyers grew impatient and moved off to the east. The men inside the submarine looked around at each other, sweat dripping from their temples despite the cold, adrenaline still burning in their system. Someone whispered the obvious, "They're not letting us go." Fife nodded. "Which means they'll sweep back." They did. 2 hours later. This time Fife didn't hide. He fought. He brought Batfish upward slowly, carefully, seeking a firing angle. He wanted a destroyer silhouette, just one. The destroyer zigzagged aggressively, releasing small depth bombs, trying to force Batfish to reveal herself by noise or motion. Through the periscope, Fife finally caught sight of one. A Japanese Mutsuki-class destroyer, frothy wake cutting a long scar through the water. The angle was tight, the distance short, the reaction time minimal, but it was enough. Tubes 1 and 2, open outer doors quietly. The crew moved like ghosts. "Solution ready," Fife fired. 2 torpedoes streaked forward, leaving thin white wakes on the surface. The destroyer saw them too late. She attempted a sharp, evasive turn. Her bow cutting violently, but the spread was perfect. One torpedo slammed into midship, the second tore into the engine room. The ship folded into itself, metal screaming, fire erupting into the sky. The men aboard Batfish barely celebrated. There was no time. Where there was one destroyer, there was always another. Within minutes, sonar picked up the second Japanese ship closing fast. But this one was moving erratically. Depth charges had already softened Batfish's nerves. Every man braced for the next. Instead, the destroyer passed in front of them without releasing a single charge. Either it believed Batfish had fled westward, or the captain hesitated, unwilling to risk his last remaining escort. Whatever the reason, the ocean swallowed the destroyer in the distance. Silence returned. But Fife wasn't done. Not yet. That evening, while recharging batteries on the surface, Batfish picked up faint radio chatter. Intercepts were scattered, but one report stood out. Japanese assets reporting unidentified American submarines sinking multiple warships. Orders issued to increase Pacific anti-submarine patrols. Tokyo was aware now. The Japanese Navy was not merely shaken. It was offended. Humiliated. A single submarine taking out destroyers was bad enough. But multiple destroyers in days? Unthinkable. Destroyers were the pride of Japan's fleet. Fast, elegant, expertly manned. The Imperial Navy had once believed they trained the finest destroyer captains in the world. Now those captains were going down faster than intelligence officers could report their losses. The US Navy back in Pearl Harbor did not yet realize the scale of the feat. Communications lagged, patrol reports traveled slowly, but among Batfish's crew, the truth was undeniable. They weren't just having a lucky patrol, they were rewriting submarine warfare. Still, Fife reminded his men, "We're not done. We have torpedoes left, and targets out here don't stop." He was right. At 0200 hours, sonar caught another faint signal. Slow, heavy. A different sound pattern from destroyers. Deeper thumping, steady intervals. A tanker. Japan's lifeblood. If fuel could not make it home, no battleship, no carrier, no destroyer could sail. Sink the tankers, and the Empire's war machine collapsed. Fife stared at the plotting board. This one matters. The crew readied silently. No cheering, no whispers, just determination. Batfish dove and maneuvered into firing position. Periscope up. Fife scanned the surface and froze. Not one, but 2 tankers, and an armed escort trawler. Not a warship, but still armed, still deadly, but also slow, predictable, vulnerable. Fife's lips tightened. "Let's finish this." The firing sequence unfolded with clockwork precision. Torpedo wakes streaked toward the first tanker. The enemy didn't even realize what was happening until the entire horizon flashed white with the explosion. Fuel burned so fiercely that the night sky turned into day for a moment. The second tanker panicked, turning the wrong way directly into a firing solution. The escort trawler charged blindly, guns firing at nothing, unaware the submarine was already below, maneuvering for the final strike. One torpedo, one hit, one sinking. When the final Japanese ship disappeared beneath the waves, the crew of Batfish stood in silent shock. Some men cried, not from emotion but from nerves finally snapping after days of tension and survival. Others laughed softly, exhausted, disbelieving. 5 ships sunk in 4 days, including destroyers, the hunters of the sea. And still, Fife kept the same calm expression. "We continue the patrol," he said simply. No drama, no boast, just the quiet understanding that history had shifted. The night after the tanker explosions, the USS Batfish moved slowly beneath the surface, cruising at 3 knots, riding the dark currents like a predator that no longer needed to prove anything. Inside the steel hull, the atmosphere was different now. The men carried themselves with a mixture of exhaustion and awe, not arrogance, but disbelief that they were part of something sailors would tell their grandchildren about. Yet even in that glow, no one relaxed fully. Submariners knew the ocean punished pride faster than any enemy. Lieutenant Commander Fife remained steady, analytical, almost cold in his concentration. Victory meant nothing if the submarine did not make it home. And sinking 5 ships in 4 days meant the Sea of Japan would not remain quiet for long. Japanese anti-submarine groups would mobilize from every port: Oki, Sasebo, Tsushima, Maizuru, and all would converge toward the last known reports of the American ghost submarine. By dawn, the water around them grew choppy. Winds strengthened, swells rose. The sea itself seemed restless, as if anticipating a final clash. The first sign of the new threat appeared at 0700 hours. Sonar picked up something faint, not ships at first, but a kind of low electrical hum that vibrated through the headphones. Then the operator recognized it. "Aircraft sound signature," he whispered. "Japanese patrol plane, probably a J-1N or a float plane, circling." Aircraft meant one thing. The Japanese had narrowed the search area. Fife ordered a deep dive, 250 feet, then angled the boat southeast, away from the aircraft's expected shadow patterns. The submarine eased downward, slipping into the cold darkness where sunlight turned into faint, glimmering threads. But airplanes were only the beginning. Hours later, sonar detected high-speed screw noise approaching from the north, fast, aggressive, the unmistakable rhythm of Japanese destroyers moving with determination. 2 ships, then a third. The hunt was on. The Batfish slowed to 1 knot, drift diving silently in an attempt to avoid detection. The lights dimmed. Men breathed quieter. A dropped spoon could have been a death sentence. Then came the first ping. This time, the Japanese destroyers weren't sweeping lazily. They were attacking in a coordinated grid, spacing themselves evenly, covering every depth layer with disciplined timing. The pattern was unmistakably different from the destroyers Batfish had fooled earlier. These were veteran hunters, men who had spent years stalking submarines in the South China Sea and the Solomons. Fife studied the plot board, listening to every ping. "Hold at this depth," he whispered. "Don't give them anything to listen for." The Batfish drifted silently as the pings grew louder, sharper, harder. The water vibrated with each sonic blast. The first depth charges fell 30 minutes later. The explosions came in strings, 4 at a time, perfectly spaced, designed not to destroy a submarine outright, but to corral it, push it toward other destroyers waiting patiently in an ambush pattern. Fife understood instantly. "They're funneling us," he murmured. The entire submarine shook violently. Bolts groaned. Dust rained from the pipes again. Men grabbed hold of whatever they could. One of the junior sailors bit down so hard he cracked a tooth. Then another set of depth charges exploded from the opposite direction. The destroyers were coordinating. The Batfish was caught in a tightening net. Fife knew he had only one move left. Something risky, something only the most seasoned submarine captains attempted. He would rise slightly, reposition, and slip between the destroyers during the split-second gap when both ships turned to avoid colliding with each other. It was threading a needle in the dark. "Helm," he said softly. 5 degrees up, bubble. Ahead, 1/3. The submarine rose silently through the pressure layers. Sonar listened with brutal focus. The destroyers converged again. The ping synchronized. Another heavy string of depth charges splashed into the sea. But Fife had anticipated the timing. "Right full rudder," he whispered. The submarine angled sharply, sliding under the gap created when the destroyers crossed their paths to reposition. The depth charges detonated behind them. The underwater thunderclap shook everyone off their feet, but the hull held. The Japanese destroyers realized their mistake seconds later. They accelerated to pursue, but Batfish had already slipped into deeper water, drifting silently into a thermal layer that muffled sonar. For the first time in hours, the submarine rested in relative calm. The men looked at Fife with a newfound respect. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just checked the depth gauge and said, "Vent bilges. Hold here." Night fell slowly underwater. A symbolic shift, not a visual one. The sea outside was black, regardless of the hour. But inside the submarine, the air turned colder, the breathing slower. Everyone felt the weight of what they had survived. By midnight, the destroyers had disappeared. They had assumed the American submarine was either destroyed or crippled, but Batfish was neither. Fife took a moment to consider their torpedo load. They were running low, but they were not empty. And the Japanese did not know that. At 0200 hours, sonar picked up something unexpected. Slow propeller screws. Heavy, monotonous, not military, possibly a freighter or a small tanker. The US Navy doctrine said to avoid unnecessary risks when low on torpedoes, but doctrine did not apply to Batfish now. Not after 5 kills, not after surviving a coordinated destroyer hunt, not after slipping between 2 destroyers with an underwater maneuver most commanders wouldn't dare attempt. Fife stood over the plotting table, hands calm, voice steady. "We take one more." The crew nodded. Not because they agreed, but because they trusted him with their lives. The submarine rose to periscope depth. The ocean surface shimmered faintly in moonlight. Fife lifted the periscope. A Japanese cargo vessel, about 3,000 tons, ploughed forward. Unaware it sailed alone, no escorts, no smoke from other stacks, just one ship moving in the night, carrying whatever scraps of supplies Japan still clung to. Fife steadied the crosshairs. "Standby tubes 3 and 4. The firing solution stabilized. "Fire!" 2 torpedoes launched, streaking toward the helpless ship. The first missed, a dud or a miscalculation, but the second struck perfectly beneath the boiler room. The explosion was massive, a blossom of fire and steel. The ship listed sharply, her hull cracking open, cargo spilling into the sea. Water filled her holds in minutes. The men aboard Batfish watched through the periscope as the final Japanese sailors leapt into lifeboats, scrambling to escape the burning deck. No cheering followed. Everyone knew the truth. This was not glory. This was war. Cold, efficient, necessary destruction. Fife ordered the submarine deep again, slipping back into the darkness. With that, the 4-day spree was over. 6 ships sunk in 5 days, 3 destroyers, 1 escort, 2 merchant vessels. No American submarine in the Sea of Japan had achieved anything like it. When Batfish finally surfaced to transmit a brief coded report, carefully encrypted, speaking only in tonnage and coordinates, the radio men at Pearl Harbor stared at the numbers in disbelief. The next morning, commanders reread the message 3 times before accepting it as real. What the Japanese Navy called an impossible phantom submarine was, in fact, a single boat commanded by a quiet, precise man who trusted mathematics more than luck. When Batfish returned to port weeks later, she looked ordinary. Weathered paint, barnacled hull, scratched steel, But the men who stepped onto the pier carried the weight of something extraordinary. One officer in Pearl Harbor famously muttered while reading Fife's patrol log, "Destroyer killer. Hell." It hunted whatever it wanted. News filtered slowly to Japan as well. Japanese officers pored over after-action reports, survivors' accounts, and frantic radio dispatches. None could understand how a single submarine outmaneuvered veteran destroyer captains and shredded their patrol lines. One admiral reportedly said, "This cannot be one submarine, it must be many." But it wasn't many. It was one. One submarine. One commander. One crew. For 4 unbelievable days in 1944, deep in the Sea of Japan, the USS Batfish did what Japan believed impossible, and the legend of the destroyer killer was born.